Alright. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And good day to everyone. We are going to continue our last sensory evaluation and food product development experiment or lab on the fourth lab, which is covering the descriptive test. So previously we already covered on the basic tests and order recognition tests. And then we also know how to measure the sensory for acceptance test. If we want to measure the acceptance of our new products, we can use acceptance test. Okay, and then you already know how to measure whether there is a difference or not between sensory. So you use discriminative or different tests. So this time you are going to learn on how to do the sensory evaluation using trained panelists. So when we use trained panelists, they have higher capability in sensory activities. So these people able to describe the characteristic of the food products. All right. So let's start. So basically, we can divide this descriptive test into two types, which are quantitative and qualitative. Okay. From the term itself, quantitative, meaning that this trained panelists will give us data. Okay, data from the sensory score that they give to us. So under quantitative descriptive tests, we have texture profile analysis, TPA, and quantitative descriptive analysis. While for qualitative tests, we have flavor profile analysis. So it much more challenges if we do the qualitative test, since we will not obtain or receive any number. Okay, so the measurement is much difficult because it based on the description only. And for your level, we only cover the quantitative descriptive analysis. Yeah, this one, QDA. So what is QDA? It is categorized as quantitative descriptive test, where it is widely used in food industry to fully describe the product's attributes. That's why we require trained panelists, because they have the ability to describe the product. For example, if you present potato chips to them, and then you ask them to describe about the potato chip, they will able to describe the whole characteristic of the potato chips, starting from the appearance, and then taste, the texture, okay, the aroma. When they describe in terms of texture, they will go one by one. What are the special or the most important characteristic in terms of texture for the potato chip? It might touch on the crispiness. It might touch on the hardness. Okay, so these are all the important terms that usually only be able to be described by this trained panelists. Okay, if you have noodle, okay, noodle sample, they will describe the springiness, the elasticity of the texture of the noodle. Okay, not all people can do this. So I am referring to the books written by Professor Amina from UKM, who used to be my former lecturer. Okay, he is an expert in sensory. She stated that the panelists will be chosen based on the specific criteria, and they must undergo several times of training session before they are able to be called as trained panelists, and they are allowed to be the panelists for this QDA session. All right, so what's so special about QDA? We don't require a lot of number of the panel. Okay, remember for acceptance test, we require at least 25 to make it reliable. Okay, the data reliable for us to use. But for QDA or descriptive tests, since they are coming from trained panelists, so we only require a small number of the panelists to make it reliable for us to use. Okay. Other than that, what's so special in QDA as compared to the other tests, these panelists will sit together. They have discussion. This is very, very different from the other tests, since on the other tests, panel must do the sensory test independently. They are not allowed to discuss, okay, between each other. Other than that, I found that the special about QDA is that the panelists will be come out with the sensory form. It is not the sensory team. Okay, it is not those who are doing the sensory analysis to come up with the score sheet or scorecard, but the panelists itself. Okay, the panelists themselves will discuss among each other, and then they will come up with few terms that's suitable to describe the product being given to them, and then they will have a consensus discussion until wrap up. They can come up with the good terms, and they will produce a score card or score sheet to be used in the final analysis. Okay, we go one by one. How does this quantitative descriptive analysis being carried out? It is a long procedure. Okay, first of all, the sensory team. Let's say I am the one who want to have the result for my sample in descriptive test. So I will do a recruitment. Okay, I will call upon people from anywhere that is available to come, okay, to the lab, because they have to go through several stages before they are able to be my panelists later on. Okay, you can just invite a large number of people. Maybe you can invite up to 100 people. Okay, however, 30 candidate also can also accepted for the first stage. You invite them to the lab for screening process. So during screening, okay, let's say you have 100. We only want to choose the best 15 panelists who are able to get a good score during the screening testing. So what are the tests that we use during screening? We can use comparison tests. We can use duo trio tests. Okay, because we already learned about these two, right? So let's say in duo trio, we will present 3 samples to the panelists. And then we know that the 2 samples are identical, while only 1 sample is an odd sample. So if you do the duo trio test, the panelists get a good score. You do the paired comparison test for several characteristics: saltiness, bitterness, sweetness. These panelists also able to get a good score. Okay, it might be 100% correct. So that people has a chances to be selected as to be selected to be trained for trained panelists. Okay, so these are the example we already covered actually previously. We can use sucrose solution, series of concentration, salt solution, series of concentration if they are managed to choose which one is higher than the other. That people actually having a good taste stimuli. All right. So let's say we already have 15 potential panelists. So these 15 potential panelists are not only able to have a good score in the sensory test that we give on them, but they also comply with other characteristic or other factors that we're looking for example, in terms of availability, in terms of willingness, the motivation, because if the panelists cannot give commitment, they are also not suggested to be trained panelists because the QDA session will take a long period of time to be completed, right? So maybe out of 100, we already find out around 10 to 15 people that capable of. So what happened next? A sensory team, my team, one of them will be a panel leader to facilitate the training and lead the discussion because my team cannot be the panelists. Okay, remember those who are run the sensory evaluation test cannot be panelists because it will create biasness. So they in QDA, they only can be the panel leader because in QDA, it must be a person who conduct the session. So that will be handled by panel leader. So what panel leader do? The panel leader will present her or his product to the panelists and ask the panelists to come up with the suitable product descriptor. Individually, if I have 15 potential trained panelists, I must get 15 descriptors for appearance, for texture. Okay, they must have their own terms. All right. So after that, after the session about 10 hours, they must come up with reference standard. Okay, for example, if one panelist if one panelist want the characteristic in terms of texture to be springiness, how you determine springiness? It's not easy. If you want to come out with the term or descriptors of elastic, how you describe elastic? Can you show me? Okay, so elastic is the descriptor. So what is the reference standard that refer to the descriptor? Okay, if I say elastic is like rubber band that we can extend. Okay, extend the size and it will come back to the normal size. That is elastic. So the panel leader together with their team must come out, must buy and prepare that reference standard because all these items will be used during the training. All right. So after that, these 15 potential trained panelists will have a discussion and make a consensus on the product descriptor, because after all, they need to come up with only one score sheet. So let's say I have 15 potential panelists and every single panelist have their own term. Maybe 5 of them agree to use the term golden yellow as the highest intensity and whitish as the lowest intensity. And then the other 10 of them should agree to use the term brown as the higher intensity and yellow as the lowest intensity. So they have to make consensus which one is the most relates to the product being given by the panel leader. Okay, only one consensus descriptors for each characteristic need to be written on the score sheet. All right. This is the example of descriptors for rempeyek. Okay, for example, if you look at here, in terms of appearance, all these 15 trained panelists, potential trained panelists, make a consensus. They agree to use the lowest intensity for appearance is light yellow. So how you describe light yellow? They are referring to the light yellow plain paper. So must prepare. In that situation, they must be available. Okay, the light yellow plain paper must be provided. We can see in front of us. Then only we know how to evaluate. We can compare with the real products. And then in terms of highest intensity of appearance, they agree to be brown color. So how you describe how brown is brown? Okay, so the panel leader and his team must buy and prepare brown plain paper. How many you want to prepare? At least 15 because you have 15 potential trained panelists. Okay, secondly, on the aroma, they agree to have fresh odor. Fresh odor as the lowest intensity. And how you refer the fresh odor? Okay, they agree to refer the fresh odor of rancidity, referring to the freshly prepared rempeyek. It's not stored rempeyek. So the panel leader with their team need to provide, okay, this freshly prepared rempeyek on that table so that everybody can see and taste. This is how we agree. This is how we describe fresh odor. So everybody agree. All right. How we agree on the highest intensity of rancidity? Okay, the reference that used on. Okay, all that has been used and stored for few months. For example, it's already create the rancid odor. So it must be bring to that session. Okay, it must be available on the table so everybody can have a chance to sniff. This is how the rancid odor uh, smell. All right, so same like others. Okay, so I think you can slowly look into the notes, and if you have any question, you can just text me. Okay, so now we already have the descriptor, and then we also have the reference standard. So what next? These 15 potential trained panelists must sit together and develop a QDA scorecard or score sheet. So it is different like other highly different, okay, from the other sensory form, okay, where in this scorecard there was a line, okay, there were a line that will be drawn based on each descriptor. How long will be the line? 50 cm or 6-inch straight line. And from each end, it will be anchored about 1.5 cm. I will show you later. So now we already have a scorecard or score sheet. In that score sheet or scorecard, what you have to write, we have a line, okay, and then from the left hand side will be the lowest intensity that we discussed previously. Remember in here, okay, the lowest intensity, and on the right hand side will be terminology for the highest intensity. All right. So now we already have sensory form. What next? It might be on the next day. It depends. That's why I said this QDA takes a long time. So only those who have a motivation, who can give commitment, can be in this session. So maybe based on the tabulated time, okay, maybe 2 days or a week after you preparing the scorecard, then only the panel. Who will be the panel? The 15% that come out with the descriptor, the 15% that come out with the scorecard will be the panel testing. Okay, but not the panel leader. Panel leader is actually coming from the sensory team. He or she just facilitate the session. All right. So this panelist will take the sample from the panel leader. Okay, let's say the sample is rempeyek, and then from each rempeyek, they will evaluate and give score. Okay, this rempeyek in terms of aroma, is it too rancid or not rancid? So on which line? They must be able to do this because they already have been trained. All right, so other than that, for QDA, if you have 4 samples, you must have 4 different scorecards. Okay? So from here, from the line, and then you do the panelists must point out which line they measure the intensity, and then from there, the sensory team must measure the length and make them into a tabulated data, and then they can run for, if the sample is only 2, they can run for t-test. If the sample more than 2, they can run ANOVA. From there, they can see whether there is a different or not, significant different or not between the samples that being present to the panelists. And at the end, usually they came up with spider web, because the spider web can show the overall characteristic of a sample. Okay, so this is the score sheet or scorecard. All right, so 1.5 cm from each end, and the length of this line is actually 6-inch or 15 cm. For example, this is an example. When the trained panelist tastes the sample, okay, and then she or he measure, the appearance is not light in yellow. It might be slightly brownish in color, but not too brown. So he decided to give the score over here. So the sensory team will measure from here to here. So how much, okay, how much the length, okay, the cm. So and then must put in tabulated the data must be tabulated like this. Okay, for example, the data you have like this, and turn it using Excel. But in this example, I'm not running any t-test. Okay, so for a real situation, if the sample is 2 like this, we need to do the t-test, right? So if the sample more than 2, you must run the ANOVA, then only you know whether there is a significant or not in terms of every single attribute towards 2 different rempeyek. So this is the mean actually. For example, we have 15 reading. So we sum up and find the mean. So the mean score here will be used to create this nice spider web. Okay, because this spider web will help you to actually joining all the attributes and can compare between sample. All right. So measure the line from the 0 point and then calculate statistically. So for example, in this in this situation, we can conclude that rempeyek A is described to have higher intensity in hardness, crispiness, and saltiness, while rempeyek B is described to have higher intensity. Okay, rempeyek B, red color, higher intensity in terms of color, right? Rancidity, oiliness, aftertaste. All right, that's how you actually doing the quantitative descriptive analysis. Thank you.